I thought I knew what loyalty meant, until the day my best friend betrayed me in the most unthinkable way possible. Picture this: someone you've shared your deepest secrets with, someone you'd trust with your life, someone who promised to always have your back, suddenly becomes the very person who stabs you in it. This is my true betrayal story, and if you think you know how it ends, you don't. Her name was Sarah, and for 8 years, she wasn't just my best friend, she was my sister in every way that mattered. We met in college, two lost freshmen trying to navigate a world that felt too big and too scary. From day one, we were inseparable. Sarah had this infectious laugh that could light up any room, and a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she listened to you. We shared everything: midnight pizza runs, failed exams, heartbreaks, dreams about our future. We even moved to the same city after graduation, renting apartments just 3 blocks apart. I trusted her with my life. When my father passed away during our junior year, Sarah held me as I cried for hours. When I got my first job offer, she was the first person I called. When I met David, the man I thought I'd marry, Sarah was there cheering me on from the sidelines, helping me pick out the perfect dress for our first official date. Our friendship was built on a foundation of complete honesty and unwavering loyalty. We had this pact: no matter what happened, we'd always tell each other the truth. No secrets, no lies, no betrayals. We even joked that we were more reliable than any romantic relationship either of us had ever been in. Little did I know, that foundation was already beginning to crack. The first sign something was wrong should have been obvious, but when you trust someone completely, you make excuses for the inexcusable. It started about 6 months into my relationship with David. Sarah began acting different. She'd cancel our weekly coffee dates last minute, claiming work emergencies that seemed to happen every time I wanted to talk about David. When I'd text her excited updates about my relationship, her responses became shorter, colder. The girl who used to send me paragraphs of encouragement was suddenly responding with single-word answers. "That's great," she'd text when I told her David and I were becoming serious. "Cool," when I mentioned we were talking about moving in together. "Busy, talk later," became her standard response to most of my messages. But the strangest thing was how she started asking questions about David, probing questions that felt invasive rather than caring. She wanted to know his work schedule, his favorite restaurants, what he did on weekends when I wasn't around. I thought she was just being protective, maybe a little jealous that I had less time for our friendship. I was so wrong. The lies started small. Sarah would mention running into David at places where he'd never been. She'd reference conversations they'd supposedly had that David never mentioned to me. When I'd bring it up to him, he'd look confused and say they'd barely talked beyond polite hellos. Then came the secrecy. Sarah, who used to share every detail of her life with me, became mysteriously private. She'd get texts and quickly hide her phone. She started going out more, but was vague about where or with whom. When I'd suggest we hang out, she always seemed to have plans she couldn't or wouldn't explain. "Just doing my own thing," she'd say with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. The woman who once told me everything was now a stranger living in my best friend's body. But even then, even with all these red flags waving in my face, I never suspected the truth. The thought that never crossed my mind, the betrayal I never saw coming, was already destroying everything I held dear. The night everything came crashing down was supposed to be perfect. David had been acting mysterious for weeks, and I was sure he was planning to propose. He'd asked me to meet him at Marcello's, the little Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. My heart was racing with excitement as I got dressed, imagining the ring, the speech, the beginning of our forever. I arrived early, practically floating on cloud 9, when I saw them. At a corner table, partially hidden by a decorative pillar, sat David and Sarah. But they weren't just having a casual conversation. David's hand was covering hers across the table. Sarah was leaning in close, whispering something that made him smile in a way I thought was reserved only for me. My blood turned to ice. I watched, frozen in disbelief, as my boyfriend of 8 months and my best friend of 8 years shared what was clearly an intimate moment. The way they looked at each other, the familiar ease of their body language, the gentle caress of his thumb across her knuckles, this wasn't their first secret meeting. Then David leaned across the table and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss that told the story of a relationship that had been growing in the shadows while I lived in blissful ignorance. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a sob, something, because they broke apart and saw me standing there. The color drained from both their faces. Sarah's eyes went wide with what looked like genuine panic, while David just stared at me with the expression of a man who knew his world was about to collapse. "It's not what it looks like," Sarah said, the first words she spoke to me, and they were a lie. But it was exactly what it looked like. My best friend and my boyfriend had been having an affair, and I'd been too trusting, too blind, too naive to see it happening right in front of me. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. This wasn't just cheating. This was a double betrayal by the two people I loved most in the world. The two people who were supposed to protect me had been working together to deceive me. What happened next is still a blur of raw emotion and shattered trust. I remember David standing up, trying to reach for me, his mouth moving but no coherent words coming out. Sarah was crying, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she kept saying my name like it was some kind of prayer that could undo what I'd just witnessed. But I was done listening to lies. "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions tearing through my chest. They looked at each other, even in this moment of crisis. They were communicating in a way that excluded me, and I knew. I knew it had been going on for months. Maybe from the very beginning. 3 months, David finally admitted, and Sarah shot him a look that suggested it might have been longer. 3 months. A quarter of our relationship had been built on lies and deception. But more than that, my best friend had been lying to my face for 3 months, comforting me when I worried David was distant, encouraging me when I doubted our relationship, all while she was the reason for every single one of my insecurities. "I trusted you," I whispered to Sarah, and those 4 words carried 8 years of shared secrets, childhood dreams, and broken promises. "I know, and I'm so sorry," she started, but I cut her off. "You held me when I cried about my dad. You helped me pick out the dress I wore on my first date with him. You looked me in the eye every single day and lied." My voice was getting stronger, fueled by righteous anger. "You didn't just steal my boyfriend, Sarah. You stole my ability to trust anyone ever again." I turned and walked out of that restaurant, leaving behind not just a relationship, but a friendship that had defined nearly a decade of my life. The 2 people I thought would be at my wedding someday had just blown up my entire world, and I was completely, utterly alone. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I felt like I was grieving 2 deaths, the death of my relationship with David and the death of my friendship with Sarah. But losing Sarah hurt more because friendships are supposed to be different. They're supposed to be safe harbors in the storm, not the storm itself. Sarah tried to contact me dozens of times. Calls, texts, emails, even showing up at my apartment. She wanted to explain, to apologize, to somehow make it right. But how do you apologize for systematically dismantling someone's trust? How do you explain away months of calculated deception? David, to his credit, didn't try to justify his actions. He sent one text, "I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better than both of us." At least he had the decency to acknowledge the magnitude of what they'd done. For months, I questioned everything. Every memory, every conversation, every moment of happiness I'd shared with either of them felt tainted. I wondered if Sarah had ever been my real friend, or if I'd just been convenient until something better came along. I wondered if David had ever loved me, or if I'd just been a placeholder until he figured out what he really wanted. But slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. I started therapy. I reconnected with other friends I'd neglected while I was wrapped up in David and Sarah's world. I threw myself into work, into hobbies, into becoming a stronger version of myself. The hardest lesson I learned was this: betrayal says nothing about your worth and everything about the betrayer's character. I didn't deserve what happened to me because I was too trusting or too naive. I deserved it because two people I loved chose their own desires over my well-being, and that choice reflects their moral compass, not mine. Today, 2 years later, I can honestly say I'm grateful for that devastating night at Marcello's. Not because I enjoyed the pain, I wouldn't wish that kind of betrayal on anyone, but because it taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. It showed me that I could survive losing the two most important people in my life and still find ways to trust again, love again, and believe in friendship again. I learned that true friends don't disappear when you find happiness elsewhere. Real friends celebrate your wins, support your dreams, and would never, ever betray your trust for their own gain. The friendship I thought I had with Sarah was built on shared history, but real friendship is built on shared values. Sarah and David got married last year. I found out through social media, and for the first time, I felt nothing but pity for them. They built their relationship on the foundation of betrayal and deception. How do you trust someone who is willing to lie and sneak around with you? How do you build a future with someone who showed you they're capable of such calculated cruelty? If you're watching this because you've experienced betrayal by someone close to you, I want you to know you will survive this. The pain you're feeling right now is real and valid, but it's not permanent. Use this betrayal as information about who deserves a place in your life going forward. Not everyone who claims to love you actually knows how to love you. Your story doesn't end with their betrayal, it begins with your courage to rebuild. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to 30 Minutes of Courage for more true stories of resilience and strength. Share your own experiences in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And remember, being betrayed doesn't make you weak. Surviving it makes you unstoppable. You've got this. I believe in you.